Welcome back to Card Clankers. In today's video, I will be taking every Set 2 leader and ranking them based on how I feel they are as partners in Twin Suns. Now in Set 2, we got a very unique set of different leaders revolving around different abilities, different mechanics, the new mechanics Smuggle and Bounty, and we got some more archetypes like Mandalorian, Underworld leaders, and we got some other little interesting ones that I think may not have had a whole lot of support or not enough support to make it viable, at least right now, but may have some long-term potential. So I'm going to start off with Gar Saxon. Gar Saxon, front side says each friendly upgraded unit gets +1/+0. So shields, experience tokens, or upgrades all will give the unit a +1 buff. Not for each upgrade on it, mind you, only if it is an upgraded unit. He deploys on 6 and is a 4/7 that says each friendly upgraded unit gets +1/+0 and gains when defeated. You may return an upgrade that was attached to this unit to its owner's hand. So for me, immediately right off the back, I'm going to put him as a B. And the reason being is because any deck for me right now that depends, or any leaders, sorry, that depends on something or wants to see this or see that, is in the B category for me. Just because, especially when it comes to upgrades, because you could sit there and spend all this time, you can spend multiple phases trying to build up one unit to have, like, say 3 upgrades on it, and just for it to turn around and just immediately get defeated by a blue card or something that will just defeat it, and you're kind of left with nothing because you had either one or you had 2 units that got really beefy, and now you may not have nothing while they had a board that's 3-4 units deep, and it becomes, I think, a bit of a struggle at that point, especially when you're sitting at a table with typically like 3 other players or 2 other players. More than just a 1v1. I think in a multiplayer format, it is definitely a difficult thing to try and pull off because there's just more people to stop you. Next up, Qi'ra. She is she has action, pay 1, exhaust her, deal 2 damage to a friendly unit, then give a shield token to her, or to it. I really love this leader. I think it's another one that is going to flip-flop with Krennic with Grand Inquisitor, since Grand Inquisitor already kind of does the whole deal 2 damage to a unit, power 3 or less, and ready it. She will kind of go hand in hand with him. He will kind of let you do things with the low powered ones, get them ready. She will let you do things with higher power ones, because obviously with like GI, you're not going to sit there and put like the grit cards that are at like 5 power already and stuff like that, because you just can't ready them. But Qi'ra at least gives you that ability to be able to maximize those grit units as well, along with also just giving out a shield token. And her backside's pretty interesting too. She comes out on 5. She's a 0/8 with grit. When deployed, heal all damage from each unit, then deal damage to each unit equal to half its remaining HP, round it down. I really like this ability because it instantly makes her a 4/4, which is a bit risky. She can be defeated to so many things. But the thing is that she is handing out shield tokens. So even if you deal that 2 damage to other units that isn't exactly required, like have the grid ability, you could still do that to other units just to give them some form of protection, and then you can deploy her, heal all that damage that is on it, and even though it's going to deal half the damage equal to its remaining HP, it's just going to ping the shields off. So they're going to be back to full HP. They're going to, be around, stick around a little bit longer. And she hits all units, all four players' units. So if there are players that didn't have damage on their units, now all of theirs, including their leaders, if they've deployed them, will now all have damage on them, making it much easier for everybody to defeat, realistically any threats that are on the table. So I really like her as a leader, and for me, I have her at an A because of this. I think she's just very solid. Also, being in vigilance is a huge boost. Same thing being in villainy. I mean, there's you can control, you can protect your things, you can make your things bigger. Like she's gonna be an all around player, just like for me, just like Krennic. So I think she'll be an interesting one. Next up is Finn. I'm not a big fan of Finn and what he does, and I could be wrong. This is solely my opinion on these things. But Finn is an action exhaust them, defeat a friendly upgrade on a unit. If you do, give a shield token to that unit. So he could protect, your own units, but at the cost of an upgrade. So typically, like kind of how I've seen him work is kind of like you sack experience tokens for shields, because obviously shield for shield just doesn't make any sense. And again, doing an upgrade themed deck with Finn just to pay 3-4 resources to put an upgrade on a unit, just to sit there and turn around and sack it to Finn to give the unit a shield token. Just it's okay. Um, if this ability was more specifically on a rebel leader, I feel like it would be a little bit significantly better, just because Rebels package that we got in Rebel in set one uh, already dealt with handing out experience tokens. So I feel like if he was a Rebel, that would be a lot better, but he's not. So he does deploy on 5, and he has a 4-6, which is still nice stats to come out on 5. And he is in that vigilance aspect. So again, you've got removal, you've got tons of restore, you've got uh, plenty of sentinels to protect. And if you did give a sentinel a shield or an experience token, and then you popped it to give them a shield token, now it's harder for them to kill your sentinels. So I mean, there is probably some interesting builds. I just haven't dived too deep into Finn. So right now, for me he is a C, because of just I just don't think that he's just that great right now. But I do think that he's better than just being straight up terrible, just because of, again, the 4-6 on 5 and being in the vigilance color. So next up we have Rey. I am a big fan of Rey. She, on her front side, is action, pay 1, exhaust, give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power. To me, she can really up the ante for, like, if you wanted to do an aggro based deck in a way. Even though, granted, paying the 1 to buff up a card isn't exactly helping out with your aggro game, but you also got to remember that aggro is tough in general in Twin Suns because you've got 3 players. So if you're gonna go aggro, you focus on one player and one player only, and you just try and defeat them. But the rest of the board may not allow you to do that. It may try to band together to try and stop you from being able to just immediately eliminate one player, because it's not a free for all, like, command or anything like that. So they don't want to see the game probably end that quickly. But I do like that she offers up the ability to buff up units and stuff like that. Like, I really look forward to pairing her with like a leader like Cassian, who wants you to get 3 damage in, and you've already got like all of these cheap heroism cards that are already at 3 damage, 3 power, and then you've got a bunch of cheap ones that are at 2 power that she's going to buff up to 3, so that way you can maximize on Cassian a lot easier with Rey, in my opinion. So like, I really look forward to that. I think she's also potentially a good partner with Sabine if you don't want to run the Leia Sabine aggro rebel package. I do think Rey is going to be a little bit slower, but again, I do think that it will be uh, quite the effective pairing between her and Sabine. And she comes out on 6, so that is also slow for an aggro deck. But I think Leia's also 6 if I remember correctly, so I guess it's not that much slower. Uh, but she is a 2/6. She has less power, but that restore 3 is huge, especially in Twin Suns. In Twin Suns, uh, Vigilance is going to be such an annoying aspect to deal with in Twin Suns, because there's just so much restore that's coming out, and honestly, that's why I really am dreading editing the gameplay videos with the life totals, because with set 1 we already do so much restoring. Set 2 is coming out with a lot more restoring, and there's a leader with restore printed on it, just like Krennic, and it doing all these little editings where it's like, oh, this person's at 4, oh, now they're at 1, oh, now they're at 6, oh, now they're at 3. Like, it's a pain, but it is what it is, and stuff like this is what's going to drag games out a lot longer. With the amount of restoring that they're going to be bringing out in future sets, the more and more Sentinels, the more and more restores that we're going to be getting, like, these games are going to drag out, and you're going to easily probably be looking at games that are, going to 15 resources at some point in time. In my personal belief, I think it's very well possible. At least in my pot, it is, because we always try to attack whoever has the highest life remaining. So if somebody or multiple people keep restoring, then you're just going to keep attacking those same few people to try and keep on par with the rest of the table. And on attack, she does the give an experience token to a unit 2 or less power. So I really like her. So for that, I'm gonna put her as an S. I think she has a lot of potential as a strong candidate out the gate, as like a very popular Twin Suns leader, to go with multiple set 1 leaders and multiple set 2 leaders. Like Boba Fett, I think, is a strong one, which we'll go over soon. Maybe even Han is a strong partner. So I think she's going to be quite the popular leader. So next up, we got Hondo, Mr. Hondo himself. On the front, he says, when you play a card using Smuggle, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, give an experience token to a unit. He deploys on 6, and he is a 3/7 with Raid 1, and every time you play a card using Smuggle, you may give an experience token to a unit. So you do get to pick any unit, which is kind of nuts. And it triggers, when he's deployed, it triggers every single time. My issue with Hondo is that if you look at it as a whole for set 2, there's actually not a whole lot of Smuggle cards. Yes, right now the decks are 50, but you also got to take into account that I think after set 3 releases, the minimum size of the deck goes up to 80. So you're now changing a 30 card difference in deck size of the minimum. So Hondo might be okay now, but I think once set 3 comes out and we go up to that 80 card minimum, he's going to struggle even more to be a good leader, just for the simple fact that, you've got to chalk the deck up with quite a bit of Smuggle cards, and I just don't think that you really want to just waste deck spaces for Smuggle cards that are either too expensive to be doing. Like, there are some that, like, there's like a card that's like a 2 cost command card that's a 2/2, but if you smuggle it, you pay 6. I mean, you do get to put 3 experience tokens on a unit or on it to make it a 5/5, but still to pay 6 for that, that's. I mean, I guess it would be a 6/6 because of Hondo ability, but still, it just. I don't think that there's enough there. And he may not be terrible now, but I think you've got better green leaders to be working with that over Hondo by a long shot. That I don't. I mean, your only other package that you could potentially do is if you wanted to do some underworld shenanigans. But again, in terms of trying to maximize his ability, I don't think that you're really going to get there the way that you'd like, unless you just happen to hit your smuggle cards early on. But again, with the struggle that's going to be coming out in future sets and of deck sizes and stuff, making it harder to see these smuggle cards, he's going to be in the terrible now with long-term potential. Next up, we got the Jabba the Hutt, as everybody was waiting for this card to be revealed, and they intentionally saved it for last because everybody wanted to see this leader and wanted this leader. He says, action, exhaust, choose a unit for this phase. It gains bounty. The next unit you play this phase costs 1 less. You can deploy him on 7 resources. He's a 2/12, so really hard to defeat. And when you deploy, another friendly unit captures an enemy 9-leader unit, and then also has the same ability as the front. Action, exhaust them, choose a unit for this phase. It gains bounty. The next unit you play this phase costs 2 less, so it costs 1 less more than the front side. This is by far the best political leader in the game, and will very likely be the best political leader for probably many sets, in my opinion. Just because of the fact that in Twin Suns, bounty is a risky mechanic to really build around, for the simple fact that, like, if you're looking to claim the bounty, you got to account for 2 other players at the table, or 1 other player, how many players you're playing with beyond 1 other player. So you run that risk. So for me, he is better suited as a political leader that's going to sit there and be like, okay, I want you to destroy each other's stuff, so I'm going to put a bounty here and give the other players incentive to attack that unit, get rid of threats, or get rid of pesky other units that are on the board, and let them benefit. So it's almost like sort of group huggy, but you're not being attacked. So you could easily, like, take the aggro off of you and apply it to somewhere else, make somebody else the threat, make them the target, and then you just kind of weasel your way in there in the late game to possibly take the win. So I really like him, and for me, he's S tier. I think he's going to be a heavily run leader with multiple different characters like Bossk, probably maybe even Hondo if somebody wanted to go double green. So I mostly look forward to playing him with Thrawn, if I'm being honest, because if I'm going to do a political deck, I'm also going to do a kind of control-y deck and want to try and tap my opponent's units down, put bounties on other units, and just really try to maximize this value. I know everybody's going to be going for Bossk, but again, I kind of went over it briefly, and I'll go over it more a little bit later. That bounty is just a risky thing for you to try and build around, and you try and claim these bounties. But I'll go over it once we get to Bossk. Moff Gideon. The Moff is from the starter pack, 1v1 starter pack. He is an action, exhaust, attack with a unit that costs 3 or less. If it's attacking a unit, it gets +1/+0 for this attack. He deploys on 5, so he's relatively quick, and he is a 3/6 with overwhelm, and then each friendly unit that costs 3 or less gets +1/+0 and gains overwhelm while attacking an enemy unit. So unfortunately, if you're attacking with your units at bases, you won't get the buff, you won't get the overwhelm. You got to specifically attack an enemy unit for you to get that buff. Um, so I have a love-hate relationship with Gideon right now. I think that he is definitely one that's going to get stronger with more sets, with more cheap uh, neutral cards, and by neutral I mean like just command, not command heroism, command villainy, like just they're neutral command cards that are 3 costs or less, or command villainy cards that are 3 costs or less. So that way, he can take more advantage of that and actually, maximize on it. Right now, I don't know if you're just going to chalk the deck up with enough 3 costs for this stuff to kind of be relevant in a way. I mean, there's a handful of strong 3 cost cards that are coming out as like 3 powered, or you got some even 2 costs with bounties that come out with 2 or 3 power. Um, so it's just in the late game though. Where does that become relevant as of right now? Because in late game, you're playing stuff that's probably got a significant amount of HP, 5, 6, 7. So typically, most 3 costs or less cards are like 3 powered, 2 powered. I think there are some that are 4 powered. So I mean, it doesn't do a whole lot for you right now, but I still like him, and I could be very well wrong with him because I haven't had an interest to build a deck around him yet. Because I'm more of a hero player. Uh, so I'm gonna stash him in B for me. Next up, we got Heroism Boba. He When you play a unit that has one or more keywords, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, give a friendly unit +1/+0 for this phase. I really like that you can hand that +1 buff wherever you want to. Um, so you can give it to the card that's coming into play. I'm pretty certain. Yeah, you should be able to give it to the card that's coming into play to kind of give it a buff to maybe do a little bit of protection. So if you play a Sentinel card, boom, now it's got +1 power. So if somebody does try to target it, it creates a scenario where they don't really want to trade their unit into your Sentinel just to get rid of your Sentinel. So it will kind of dissuade them from wanting to do that if they have that extra +1 power. So that's pretty cool. And you have so many cards with keywords on it: Saboteur, Restore, Ambush, Raid, even Smuggle counts. If it's got Smuggle, even if you smuggle something from your resources into play, the card has Smuggle printed on it, so that still counts as well. Overwhelm counts. Ambush still counts. Shielded counts because it. So any word that is written in the red lettering is a keyword and will in fact count. Now, if you have a tech in play, tech says specifically your resources gain smuggle. So once that card leaves the resources, it doesn't have smuggle anymore because it's not a resource. So do keep that in mind. He deploys on 6, pretty good, as a 4/7, just like his villainy counterpart. Unfortunately, comes out a turn sooner, but but he does have a static effect to where each other friendly unit that has one or more keywords get +1/+0. So, which that's just really strong if you're trying to go into the end game and you deploy him and all your units have keywords on them. Now they all get a +1 buff, and if you have 4 or 5 units out and then you deploy him, like you just buffed up your board by 4 extra power that can literally mean that you're going to end the game if somebody his life is low enough. So I really like Boba. I think he matches up with a lot of leaders. He just pairs well with quite a bit. Like he can pair up with Rey. Rey can give a buff, and he can give another buff. Even Finn, even though that's kind of, Fennec Shand, I might be saying her name wrong. Uh, she gives ambush to a unit on play, so she will count. Chewbacca gives sentinel, so that would count. So there's so many. I really, again, he's another one that I really want to try with Cassian. Just because again he's given out that buff, that +1 buff, even though it is temporary, and you got a lot of raids. You got Saboteur, or Saboteur. Like, more than likely saying that wrong too. Um, so I think there are a lot of strong leader pairings coming up, and I will go over that in future videos. So right now, Boba, he's an S. There's no way that he's not. Next up, we have Hunter. He's just terrible right now. He says action, pay 1, exhaust, reveal a resource you control. If it shares a name with a friendly unique unit, return the resource to its owner's hand and put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. And essentially his backside's going to say the same thing, but it's an on attack. Um, this ability just doesn't do you anything in Twin Suns. Now, when it says friendly unique unit, it's only going by the main name. So currently in this game, the only card that you can actually use that ability for is the Millennium Falcon, I believe. I believe that is. Yeah, now you do got Chewbacca. You do got Chewbacca, cunning heroism, and then you've got the new Chewbacca that is a vigilance heroism with a smuggle of aggression heroism. So, if you had those two, if you built the deck to somehow include both Chewbaccas and both of the Millennium Falcons, those are the only two ways that you're going to be able to actually use his ability. So I really do think that he has the long-term potential, definitely. It just is probably going to take the longest for him to develop, especially, again, once the minimum deck of the format increases by 30 cards. It becomes even harder. So he might be able to do something now, but after set 3, I mean, we could be looking at maybe even like set 8 before he's actually a decent leader to run in Twin Suns. I mean, if you're running him for his deployed side, but he doesn't deploy until you have 7 resources, which you've got enough ramp now that it's kind of like, feasible. But you run him in there for the 5/8, the 5/8 and overwhelm. I mean, it's the same as Darth Vader on terms of the 5/8, and we know that Vader can end games too. So, and having the overwhelm isn't too relevant in my opinion. I think you're swinging that 5 at base. I don't think that you're going to be wasting this on a unit or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean he's with Hera as probably the two worst leaders for Twin Suns currently, which I will go over that, and I am kind of intrigued to build that deck just because I think it would be funny and it'd be interesting to essentially run 2 leaders that's not doing me anything in the game. So we'll see. We'll see what Double Green Command um, can do in Twin Suns essentially without a leader that really does anything for them. Next up is Bossk. He has an action, exhaust, deal 1 to a unit with a bounty. You may give it a +1/+0 for this phase. He deploys on 5, which is pretty good, and is a 4/6, which is very good for 5. When you collect the bounty, you may collect that bounty again. Use this ability only once each round. Now, this is the part that I was talking about where a lot of people are going to take Bossk and pair him with Jabba because the Jabba just hands out bounties. The issue is that you don't get this double up on bounties until Bossk is deployed. And even then, you only get it once each phase. So, like, yes, with Jabba, he can make it to where on the front side, you can play a unit for 2 costs cheaper, or Jabba's deployed and it costs 4 less cheaper. But it's just like, I don't see if you're sitting at a table with multiple people where they're gonna really let you get this Bossk and Jabba going like that. Um, if you are, you're just handing out bounties to try and politic. Like, oh, okay, here I can even ping it for 1 damage and make it a little bit weaker to try and entice you into dealing with that card. Because if a unit has 5 HP, you give it a bounty, but somebody's got a 4 power attacker, it's like, oh well, here I can deal 1 damage to that unit. You finish it off. Stuff like that. It takes the eyes and attackers off of you and puts it onto somebody else, which to me I think is what you really want with these leaders. Bossk having the potential of being able to collect it if nobody else does, I think is enticing. I just think that it's risky. Bossk, if you're going to build it that way, is a high risk, high reward that could very easily backfire on you if people are aggressive about claiming the bounties that you are putting out. So that's just me. I don't think bounties is like chalking the deck up with upgrades that are bounties, the bounty upgrades and stuff like that. I just don't think that those are really smart to be trying to play if you're trying to claim them. Just again, because there's a good chance that you won't get them, unfortunately. So for me, Bossk is in a B because he's just, to me, his best pairing is right here with Jabba, maybe the villainy Boba Fett and Iden, since, he can, again, put the bounty on stuff. And same thing with Boba. Iden and Boba, here, I think I call it Jabba Boba. I don't know. But essentially, units are going to be getting defeated. So Boba's going to get maximized, and Iden's going to get maximized for your healing. So, like, those 4 leaders, no matter how you really pair those 4, are just, to me, going to be really strong. Next up, we have Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren was a really tough one for me to determine where he's at. He's action, exhaust, discard a card from your hand, give a unit +2/+0 for this phase. He does come out on Force, so he does come out at the same time as Sabine and Lando. He is a 5/4, but he gets -1 power for each card in your hand. I think in this format with multiplayer, this is just not good in my opinion. He probably should be in the terrible, just straight up terrible with no real long-term potential. Maybe he could be if they eventually came out with more consistent like reanimation or being able to get cards consistently back from your discard back to your hand. But he wants to go vroom, and going vroom in Twin Suns just is not really possible unless again you're going to target one specific player and be like, you're who I'm gunning for, and try and defeat them before everybody else decides to band together to try and stop you. Again, same thing as who was I saying earlier? I don't even remember. so, uh, so for me, I think he's just in the C. I think him coming out on 4 is a little bit too fast. I don't think you're ever going to really deploy him on 4 because I just don't think that you're going to just sit there and willy-nilly your hand away. Uh, so I don't know. I could see him being a good fit if you go late game and like you're down to like 1 card in hand, and then you can pitch it to Kylo's ability, give a unit a buff, swing with it, deal some damage, and then you can deploy Kylo if like at a point to where you know that he's not going to get defeated as soon as you deploy him, and then you potentially have a 5 power that could end the game. So that is kind of nice, and that's why, with that being said, he's not in the terrible now with long-term potential, because he does have that game ender potential if you play him out at the right time. So next up is my boy Han Solo from the Solo movie, extremely underrated. He says, action, exhaust, play a unit from your hand. It costs 1 less, deal 2 damage to it. He deploys on 5, which is very good, and is a 3/6 with action. Play a unit from your hand. It costs 1 less, deal 2 damage to it, but you can do it as many times in one phase as you want, which is, to me, pretty strong. You can kind of build Han to be like an aggro-ish leader, play things out cheaper, faster, like a turn sooner, just to really maximize on value. But like in my experience, if you play too many threats out too quick, the table will come at you, keep you in check while they build up their board, and somebody else is going to come out on top. So I don't know if the key to Twin Suns is to sit there and make yourself the target so quickly. Obviously, he's good for grit units as well. So you're going to throw in that grit package for that. Um, Other than that, I mean, it's solid at a 3/6. For me, I'm going to put him as an S tier just because I think that he's pretty open to be paired with a lot of leaders, similar as Boba. Like he's just set up to where you can mix and match him with other leaders, and it will still be a good deck. Just because there is again that ability to play something a turn sooner, just like the Cunning Han. You want to play something a turn sooner, except for Cunning Han, it costs you a card out of your hand that you to go into your resource, and you're gonna have to sack a resource at the start of the next phase. Whereas this one, you just deal 2 damage to it. So something's got like 4 or 5 health. They just come in with 2 or 3 or something like that. But they've got like 4 or 5 power, 6 power. So I think he's gonna be a pretty favored leader in Twin Suns. Very strong. So next up, we have Miss Bo-Katan herself. She primarily is built around the Mandalorian archetype. She has action, exhaust. If you attacked with a Mandalorian unit this phase, deal 1 damage to a unit. She deploys on 6 and is a 4/7, which is pretty standard. On attack, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. If you attacked with another Mandalorian unit this phase, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. So she's kind of has the ability to kind of control the board a little bit. You would stack that damage up onto the same unit if you want to, but there's surprisingly just not a whole lot of Mandalorians. Essentially, with Bo, if you want to maximize on it, you really want to go in a red-blue. If you go outside of that blue, you're not really getting a whole ton of Mandalorians. I mean, your only cunning Mandalorian is right here, is the leader. So you just Bo is kind of pretty locked into a certain set of colors, and that's what kind of is a bit of a turnoff when it comes to building her, along with the fact that she just only pings for 1 damage, which with Vader is pretty strong, but typically you're going to kind of use that to ping off any pesky shields. But I don't know if it's good enough to be ranked any higher than a C for me. Also, I do apologize if you hear dogs barking. I don't know why they're going off this late at night, but somebody must be going in and out. But so I do apologize if you do hear that. Next up is Cad Bane. One of the most popular leaders coming into set 2. One of the most hyped ones that people are looking forward to playing as. And it's understandable why. As whenever you play an Underworld card, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, an opponent chooses a unit they control and deal 1 damage to it. He deploys on 6 and is a 2/8 with raid 2. So essentially he's kind of like a 4/8 when you attack. And when you play an Underworld card, you may choose an opponent. They choose a unit they control, deal 2 damage to it, use this ability only once each round. I feel like they really played it safe with the deployed side in terms of the when you play an Underworld card. They played it very safe, just so that way you can't just play a bunch of cheap Underworlds and blow up the board, which I do think would be pretty strong. I think he's gonna be a very strong leader. I don't really like the fact that an opponent gets to choose where the one damage goes. Um, so in Twin Suns, you pick the opponent first out of however many players are playing, and then they get to choose which of their units that they control gets dealt the one damage. So, or the 2 damage if he's deployed. So, I mean, he's like pseudo board control. Having 8 HP being deployed is pretty solid. Still being able to deal 4 damage to base as well is pretty solid. So he's kind of a difficult thing to kill while also providing a decent amount of attack power and does provide some form of control. I mean, if somebody's got only like 1 unit in play, then you get to choose them, and then they gotta deal the 1 damage there. So I know a lot of people are probably going to pair Cad Bane up with like Jabba the Hutt, maybe Bossk, maybe Hondo. You know, I think mainly those Boba Fett from set 1 for a double cunning effect, which I do think right now the double colors or double aspects, like the double command, double cunning stuff like that for Twin Suns is pretty hard to do for right now, just because there's not a whole lot of double cunning cards and command cards to make it like worthwhile to sit there and chop off a whole color or aspect. But cunning is very strong. Cunning has some ridiculously good double cunning cards. I think that they have the by far the best cycle of double cunning cards out of all the aspects. So I have him at an A, just because of what kills it for the S thing is that the opponent gets to choose the damage. If you got to choose it, and if the deployed side was maybe like twice around, it'd be a little bit better. But I think you're mainly going to run him with an underworld package, so he's kind of restricted to an art type. He's not as generic as the leaders that I currently have in the S tier category. So he's going to be solid though. He's going to be solid. He's going to be popular. He's going to get played a lot. Dr. Aphra. She comes from the comic book series of Darth Vader. She is a criminal. She is an archaeologist. She says, when the regroup phase starts, discard a card from your deck. And she deploys on 5 and is a 2/5. But if you have 5 or more different costs among cards in your discard pile, she gets +3/+0. So essentially, she could be a 5/5. When deployed, choose 3 cards in your discard pile with different names. If you do, return one of them at random in your hand. I don't know why she just couldn't just return one. I felt like they really played it safe with her for some odd reason. I guess they were just scared of her being busted. I'm not really big on the fact that you mill a card from the top of your deck. You could hit something that you really don't want to mill, that you can't get back because there's not a whole lot of ways to get cards back from the drop or reanimate them back to play or anything like that yet. There is a few, but not enough to make it viable, and that's why she's got the long-term potential. Is exactly that. The more reanimation, the more being able to get cards back from the discard pile, the better that she will get in the long term, because then it's potentially getting rid of stuff that you don't want to see, or it's giving you something that you might be able to get back later on. But I just don't think that that's a good enough ability right now. Like her right now, her best pairing for me is Kylo Ren. So with Kylo Ren already, I've got ranked as a C. They're not the greatest leader pairings right now for me, but I do think that they just complement one another effectively. So I don't really have much else to say in terms of her, because she's just, I mean, 5, 5, 5, 5. I mean, she could be deployed late game and potentially in the game. I mean, any leader that's coming out with 5 HP or 5 power is just got all the potential in the world to just end games, and to me, that's how you play it. The other unfortunate thing too is that on her front side, that's not a May ability. You got to do it. You got to discard that card from the top of your deck. It's the same thing as the Han leader on attack. You gotta ramp that resource from the top of your deck. So for her at the regroup phase, you gotta mill, which is kind of interesting. You mill and then you draw two because it's at the start of the regroup phase. So that'll trigger, that'll resolve, and then you draw your two and then resource, which I think is interesting. But yeah, the not being a May ability and the on deploy trigger is a return one randomly, just it really hurts her. But I do think that she's got long term potential. Fennec Shand. I'm probably still pronouncing that last name wrong. Uh, she's action, pay one, exhaust player unit that costs 4 or less from your hand, pay its cost, give it ambush for this phase. After you play the unit, it may ready and attack an enemy unit. She deploys on 5, but she is a 4/4, so she's definitely kind of one of the squishier leaders around, with Kylo and IG. But I guess it's no real different from Sabine either. But I mean, open fire takes out this leader, so that's an issue. But she does have Saboteur, and she does have an action play a unit that costs 4 or less from your hand. Paying its cost, give an ambush for this phase. No restrictions on how many times you can do that in a turn, so you can keep doing it. As long as you can pay the cost of a 4 cost or less card, you can keep doing that every multiple times in one round or phase. So I do think that that's pretty strong, but the fact that she's just 4 HP just means that she could just be plucked right out immediately. I think she's another one that you're not really gonna look to play when you're at 5 resources. I think she's one that you're gonna play kind of pretty much right there at the end to try and get that 4 damage in. Even if somebody's got Sentinel, it's like, no, I'm gonna bypass that Sentinel and deal the last 4 damage to you. Or I think you're gonna use her for more of the game ender. I don't know how many cards you're gonna be trying to ambush in for 4 costs or less in one phase. Especially since probably at that point it's not really relevant to be ambushing too many cards, and I'm sure 4 costs or less cards aren't going to be able to take out too many things if you're talking about the late game. So it's pretty hit or miss, and I think it all depends on just how you build her, and just how you go about playing her. For me, she's just going to be a potential game ender with the Saboteur, or you can pair her with the Boba Fett, and she's going to get that +1 buff on the power. And again, that's a late game move. You deploy the Boba, you deploy Fennec, and now she's swinging it for 5. He's swinging it for 4. I mean, that's 9 total damage there. You're looking at ending the game for me with Fennec, so that's why I have her at a B. Next up is Lando. Lando I have as a strong leader for Constructed, but for Twin Suns, I have him as a C. I know y'all think I probably should have it here with Hondo, but there's a reason for the C. He is action, exhaust, play a card using Smuggle. It costs 2 less, but you gotta defeat a resource you own and control. He deploys on 4, same thing as Kylo and Sabine, and is a 2/5 with pretty much the same ability. Action, play a card using Smuggle. It costs 2 less, defeat a resource you own and control. Uses ability only once each round. I don't think you would play Lando the same way that you would in Constructed. In Constructed, you kind of keep your curve at around 4 or 5, and you kind of play from 4 or 5 resources. That's easier to do in a 1v1. I don't know if it's feasible when you're talking about multiplayer. Um, Again, I haven't fully tested it yet, but he is one that I'm interested in trying out. It's so difficult because there's not a whole lot of smuggle in the game. The only reason why Lando gets the the boost up to a C is because you do have Smuggler's Aid that heals 3 damage, and you also got Tech for heroism to give all your resources. Uh, Smuggle mechanic. If Villainy had also gotten a Tech Light card, Hondo would be here in a C at the very least. But Hondo Villainy doesn't. Lando heroism do, so that's why he gets that slight buff. I would say that you could potentially make him as an aggro with Sabine or somebody like that, and just like try and beat down one person again. But again, that's just so hard to do. So I do think that he's got potential, especially with more smuggle cards that come out. Or, you can smuggle out something big in the late game, and you're just. It comes down to deck building on this one again, and where you are going to maximize them at. I don't think that there's still just enough there, and I think Twin Suns is just a very difficult format with the singleton and stuff like that for him to be any higher than a C. Last but not least, we have the Mandalorian himself, the other 1v1 starter pack leader with Moff Gideon. Um, he says when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. He deploys on 6 and is a 4/7, pretty standard. And when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP. And that can happen multiple times. So just right off the rip, he's a B. He kind of falls into the same argument as Saxon, Gar Saxon, because of the fact that they're upgrade decks. They want upgrades. Once you play upgrades, unfortunately, shield tokens and experiences are not considered play. So you have to actually run upgrades in his deck, which again, you could be controlling, which is what does help. The board, you can be like a little bit political. Oh, I'll tap this down if you don't do this, or oh, that's a huge threat. I'm just going to tap it down, as long as it's less than 4 HP if Mando's on the front, or it's less than 6 if it's on the back, and you could tap down multiple things. I just don't think that there's enough upgrades to kind of make him viable. There's you'd have to have ways of drawing a lot of cards to try and like keep seeing those upgrades consistently, or otherwise like you're only doing this once a phase, once every other phase maybe. So I really like him with Qi'ra, since Qi'ra kind of wants to do upgrades anyway. I think that would probably be the strongest place for the Mandalorian is with Qi'ra. I am interested in building that one. So that's pretty much all I really got for him. I mean, 4 powers, 7 HP on 6 resources. Again, he's a late gamer and can potentially knock somebody out. I mean, there's not much more to say different than what I've said about other leaders. So this is my tier list for set 2 leaders as partners. I will be going over what I think is like the best leader pairings, including set 2 leaders. So they'll be paired up with set 1, other set 2 leaders, like just overall what I think is now the best leader pairings or synergy leaders and whatnot. There'll be some that'll be grouped together, like I said, like Jabba, Cad, or Jabba, Bossk, Boba Fett, Iden. Like it's probably not going to be a bunch of like this leader and that leader. There will be some, but there's just like either a triangle or a square to where like you can just shuffle leaders out and like the deck is still pretty viable, still pretty strong. It's still kind of achieving the same thing, without really completely changing the deck overall. The only thing that might change is the base color or the colors of the deck. So you might have to change out cards based on that. But other than that, it's still the same deck. Still trying to do the same things mostly. Still trying to get the same benefits, or a ton of benefits off of like an overall theme. Like you want units to be defeated. That's what those four leaders kind of want. So with that being said, I really hope people have enjoyed this video. Um, Feel free to share your opinions, agree, disagree with this leader or that leader in the comments below. Other than that, I'll see y'all in the next one.